Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Conservation Conversations. My name is Ana Sangronis, and I work for UF IFAS Extension and Florida Sea Grant here in Miami-Dade County. This webinar series is a joint effort between UF IFAS Extension, Florida Sea Grant, and Miami-Dade County Eco Adventures. We host this webinar series every second Wednesday of the month at 6 p.m. Everyone in this webinar is currently muted and videos are off. We ask that you type any questions you may have into the chat box, which will be moderated by Ed Pritchard and myself. We will have the opportunity for question and answer at the end of the presentation. This webinar is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be sent out within the next week. Please follow us on social media where we advertise these webinars, as well as showcase related content. If you'd like to receive an email reminder with the monthly conversation topic and registration link, please email me or let us know in the chat box. Now, I will turn it over to today's presenter, Eduardo Salcedo.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining me tonight for my talk about prescribed burn in Miami-Dade County, and I want to thank Ana and Ed for inviting me to be part of this series. Thank you very much. I am an environmental resource project supervisor / biologist for Miami-Dade County Parks, Recreation, and Open Spaces Department, Natural Areas Management Division. I've been working in them since 2008, but I've been in the county since 1999. At NAM, my main responsibility is to help manage several of the county preserves that the county owns, the department owns. And we do different kinds of work, mainly controlling exotic invasive vegetation. We manage for rare and endangered species. And I'm also certified in S130 and S190 and conduct the pack test with Everglades National Park, which allows us to also conduct prescribed burns and participate in the program. Well, having said that, let's go to the presentation. This view here is from Sunny Palms Preserve. I put it there because I think it's a really neat picture to show a different view of prescribed burn from the air. So we normally get to see the burns from ground level, but rarely do we get a chance to see them from the air. This was taken a few years ago. Well, how did fires start? Well, in Florida, the most common cause for natural occurring fires is obviously lightning storms. In the past, lightning storms would burn hundreds, if not thousands, of acres across Florida. Over time, these fire occurrences would happen in a rather frequent interval from between 3 to 7 years or so. And over time, these fires help influence the evolution of plants and animals. So it shaped the natural environment. And over time, some habitats became fire dependent. And now a lot of these fire dependent habitats will not persist without the influence of fire, or they would degrade without it. I would like to also point out that humans have also played a very important role in fire as a force in shaping the natural environment in the world, not only just in North America, but we have evidence also in Australia and Europe and South America that humans utilize fire for their own benefit. So I want to talk a little more about archaeological evidence that supports this. We know that humans have been practicing burning land for almost 10,500 years. Evidence of this also comes from archaeological sites from the Clovis Indians and later on the Paleo Indians, dating back almost to 12,500 years to 9,500 years. And we know they use fire for hunting, collecting nuts, and also encouraging pioneer plants. As Native Americans transitioned from a hunter-gatherer society to a more sedentary agricultural society, they rely on agriculture. Maize was one of the big crops they cultivated. The fact is that maize requires open areas, so natives would use fire to burn the land and keep it open as grasslands. And these areas became heavily used by them for agriculture, for growing maize mainly. We have evidence also that at Lake Okeechobee, near Fort Center, there was land clearing dating back to almost 3,000 years. Fast forward to European time, pioneer time. We also have accounts that Europeans mention fire being used by Native Americans for this purpose, for opening land and maintaining it. Well, the European settlers also adapted to these practices, and they adopted Native American practices and experimented themselves in their new environments. So a lot of them also start burning. But with the displacement of native populations, and there was the introduction of agriculture, high intense agriculture, logging, the railroad, and cattle grazing, which altered the ancient fire regimes practiced by the Native Americans, and the environment changed. There is a period in American history as it pertains to prescribed burns and fire called as fire suppression period. This area began in the late 1890s, and it went all the way up to 1980s. Basically, the idea was that fire was an evil force and destroyed forests and its resources. So it was enemy number one. Fire control was basically a response to damages caused by previous activities I mentioned earlier, like logging and also destructive fires. So federal land managers created a campaign against burning and against fires. So Smokey the Bear was born. It was the mascot of the anti-fire campaign for well over 3 decades. The fire management in the United States, the southern United States, started in the 40s, and it continues to this day. So it brings us to now, fire as a land management tool. As I mentioned before, Native Americans utilize fire as a land management, and that's what we're doing nowadays, just a little different. Basically, fire management is utilized to restore and maintain ecosystems, maintain healthy ecosystems. Like I mentioned before, in the southern part of the United States, fires were introduced at different points in history. But following the fire suppression period, fuel load had accumulated and ecosystems had degraded very badly. So land managers, scientists, politicians start noticing the forest were degrading, and they were changing in an undesirable way. And the purpose was to kill the lack of fire. So why do we burn? Why do we conduct prescribed burns? Well, there are 3 main reasons. One is to reduce fuel load or accumulation of fuels, like wood and debris. Also is to maintain endangered species, endangered and threatened species and habitats, and also to improve wildlife habitat. Okay. Here in Florida, we have records that the first official prescribed burn on federal land following the fire suppression period took place in Osceola National Forest. So in 1970s, the Okefenokee swamp was burned, or sections of it, for the first time. And in the 80s, in the 1980s, burns were conducted at Welaga State Forest. So you can see it wasn't all one shot, it just was a gradual practice that started in Florida. Here in Miami-Dade County, our division, Natural Areas Management, was created in 1991. Its main goal was to maintain and manage the last wilderness areas in the county. The EEL program, the Environmentally Endangered Program, lands program, was created in 1990 with the goal of acquiring land and protecting it in perpetuity. So together, NAM and EEL manage and co-manage different sites, accounting to several hundred acres, including pine rocklands, saltmarsh, freshwater marsh, scrubs. We now conduct burns on preserves, all by managed by PROS, or managed by EEL, or co-managed by the two agencies. Put these two charts to show some data that we collected over time since '96 to this year. The chart on the left shows the number of prescribed burns that we have conducted. So you can see a gradual increase of occurrence from '96 to 2022. Okay, so the other table shows wildfires, and there's a relationship between the two charts. You can see in this table that there is a decrease of wildfires as the time goes by. So the more prescribed burns, the less wildfires. That's because we are actually increasing the amount of land that we're burning, not giving chance for fuel to accumulate, reducing the chance of wildfires to happen. On this slide, I'm just showing the number of acres that we have burned per fiscal year. On the table, the first table here, in the year 98, 99, we have an outlier, and basically that shows that there was an increase of burning that year, but it cannot go down again. And that happens because there are a lot of steps that we have to take when we burn, as I will explain in later slides. Basically, this is the year 98, 99 is a year that we happen to burn very large areas. So that accounts for a large number of acres. So on the other table, acres by wildfire, it's pretty much flat. We had some spikes also in 2003 and 4, and also in 2014 and 5. And that year, 2014 and 5, we had a lot of arson going on in the county. Somebody was going around burning preserves. Okay, so I'm going to focus now my presentation from prescribed burns to pine rocklands, and to kind of emphasize the role of fire in natural areas. So basically, in Miami-Dade County, we had about 180,000 acres of pine rockland, but today we have only 1.5%. That's about less than 50,000 acres. Most of they are located also in the Everglades. This ecosystem is considered globally impaired. It is very rare nowadays and contains very high biodiversity, the highest of any Florida land ecosystem. Well, development has destroyed much of pine rocklands, and therefore has interrupted the fire regime that once occurred and fragmented the pine rocklands, or what it remains of it, basically. I said earlier that natural fires occur at an interval of between 3 to 7 years, but that happened naturally. Now, since we interrupted that cycle, we have to jump in and conduct the fires almost artificially, basically, to mimic what nature did once. NAM plans, coordinates, and conducts these burns in several county preserves. Because here on these pictures, you can see on the top picture the extent of pine rocklands in the county. You can see the vast area extending all the way from north of Key Biscayne, all the way down to Homestead, and then west to Everglades National Park. Now, the picture below shows what's left, just little tiny specks of pine rocklands scattered all over, with the largest amount in Everglades National Park. So this is caused by development, and this fragmentation has obviously not been good. I'm going to talk a little bit now, go back to fires, prescribed burns. How do they conduct it? Well, there is a before, during, and after steps. Before the fire, the area needs to be prepared. So we start doing a site visit, an evaluation. We establish fire breaks, which are openings that we cut open with machetes, usually, to allow for the crew to work and move around. These openings will close back eventually, but it's very important to run water lines, and also for safety. We also conduct fuel reduction if necessary, which means removing debris and any hardwood and palms that we think they should be removed. There's also a fire plan. We prepare a plan called a prescription, and we submit that to the Florida Department of Forestry. The most important factor of the whole process is monitoring the wind and the weather. Basically, this will determine if a prescribed burn can be done safely. So wind direction, lift, dispersal, rain, and relative humidity are all monitored. We also send notices to neighbors and businesses about prescribed burns in the area. And Miami Fire Rescue is notified the day of the prescribed burn. We have an excellent team of in the burning unit. They are composed of experienced burn bosses, trained crew, and highly skilled equipment operators. You can see here on the top picture at 80 barns, the team is preparing some equipment that they'll be used to conduct fires. And then on the bottom is at Navy Wells. Also, the team is probably just got in brief and getting ready to deploy some of the water hoses. Okay, so how are fires conducted? The next step takes place the day of the burn and then the post-burn. So if weather conditions are fine and they are within the parameters of the plan, the Florida Department of Forestry is notified, and they authorize or they will deny the burn prescription. So we get ready. The time gets all the equipment set up and ready to go. We conduct a pre-burn site orientation, and we conduct a test fire. So still, if everything goes fine and is within the plan parameters, the burn boss proceeds to the ignition phase. Now, if there are changes in the wind or weather, we might also cancel last minute. So everything is pretty much done last minute. You just have to be ready to go. During the ignition, weather conditions, like I said, are monitored. And then we monitor each hour while the fire is going on. Mop-up is probably one of the most important steps in the process as well, because it's after the fire. When ignition is complete, mop-up is the process in which the team goes back and they water down the areas, the burn areas, particularly the edges. And this is mostly because we don't want fires to reignite or jump to adjacent properties, and also to reduce smoke. So smoke management falls into this phase of post-burn. So basically, we use different techniques. We prefer backing fire technique, which is burning against the wind, but we also do burn strip fires. And I'm going to show you a video on the next slide to show you the process. This was, but before I start, this was in Navy wells a few years ago. You can see right here where the cursor is, the previous line where your black is, safety zone, and then the crew of forestry is igniting a second line with the wind blowing away from them. So you can see by the smoke movement, flames are going that way. So we're going to burn this area here. All right. Hope you enjoy that one. Okay. Hold on a second. Okay, sorry about that. All right. So there are other habitats in Miami-Dade County that are fire dependent. We don't only burn pine rocklands, but also salt marshes and scrubs. They also depend on regular fires to maintain their ecological function and ecological health. They also have a lot of rare, threatened, and endangered species that benefit from regular prescribed burns. So in these pictures, we have photographs from the Saltmarsh from the Deer State North Addition during the fire on the bottom, and then after the fire, immediately after the fire, and a month after the fire. The next step is post-prescribed burn monitoring. Okay, so NAM collaborates with Freshwater Tropical Botanical Garden in this stage to monitor rare, threatened, and endangered species. I had mentioned earlier that a lot of these listed plants are fire dependent and fire adapted, and they do depend on fire. So Freshwater Tropical Botanical Garden biologists and non-biologists, and I believe also ill biologists, conduct pre and post fire plant surveys to record changes in plant population. And these findings are published in annual reports. I'm going to jump now to talk a little bit about wildfires, because they're different than prescribed burns. Unlike prescribed burns, wildfires occur unexpectedly. They're not planned, and they can be quite dangerous, and it could even catastrophic. The Florida Department of Forestry has total authority over wildfires. Miami Fire Rescues also participates in these fires to prevent damage to public and private property. And we are called to assist and also focus on mop-up. In these pictures, you can see a fire that occurred in 2004 at Amy Thompson Park, almost the entire site burned. This is Amy Thompson on the bottom a year after that fire. So in the areas like this where are pretty open, there's not a lot of structure and private property around. Wildfires can be controlled somehow easily. You just have to make sure that fire doesn't jump to other areas or create hazard problems, dangerous on the roads with smoke. But the challenge of wildfires is worse when one of these fires takes place in an urban setting. I want to talk a little bit about how these prescribed burns benefit some of the rare and endangered species. This is a morpha lead plant. Morpha granulata is one of those plants that require fire to exist and to thrive. So the population of the state was introduced in 1995, and 10% of these plants remain today. Prescribed burn was conducted a couple of years ago, and this was a great reset for the habitat on the plants. So the fire will clear up the understory, open up the area, and it allows seeds to germinate. And within 2 months, the plants had flower and fruited. Here you can see pictures of the plant from Morpha. Another example, probably of a more known plant, Kunti, and the Atala butterfly. So Kunti also lives in pine rocklands and is a fire-adapted plant, but it was harvested heavily to produce our wood starch in such numbers that it became very rare and almost extinct. And because this plant cannot be cultivated, it was harvested from the wild, and it's very slow growing. So people would just go and cut them, almost extirpate the plant. Unfortunately, there is a butterfly, the Atala, that relies on Kunti for it is its larval host plant. Without Kunti, the Atala would disappear. So managing and burning pine rocklands has allowed the Kunti and Atala populations to come back. So you can see the adult Atala and the larva feeding on the Kunti. One more example of another plant I want to talk about is the shy plant, or the Sornia bracteata. This is another critical endangered plant that is fire adapted. It's a pine rockland species. And you can see here on the map of Florida, the Miami-Dade County population is separated from the rest of the populations in Florida. So it's disjunct from the rest of the state. So it is crucial that we conserve these species locally. We conducted a prescribed burn a couple of years ago at Roniman. The area had not been burned since 2011, and the results were incredible, because especially for Sornia, the plant responded really well. As you can see pictures here, the flower after a few months, 7 months and 9 months respectively. Okay, well, that's basically my presentation. I want to thank everybody for joining me today, and I will pass the baton to Anna, and I'll be here for some questions.
Thank you so much, Eduardo. Before we wrap up and head into the question and answer, we'd appreciate if you could give us your input with the poll that should be on your screen. It's one question. And we're asking you to indicate your level of agreement with the following statement. I learned something from participating in this webinar. Your choices are A, strongly agree, I learned a lot. B, agree, I learned something. Or C, disagree, I did not learn anything new. So we'll leave that open for just a minute before we move into the Q&A. All right. Well, thank you for participating in that, Eduardo.
Thank you.
We are going to wrap this up. That has concluded the official end of Eduardo's presentation. And it's just 6:30. So if you have to leave, no problem. We're going to stay on for our Q&A session. And as a reminder, this webinar was recorded and the link to the broadcast will be sent out within the next week. We hope that you'll join us as we resume in January, where we will be featuring Eric King of Miami Eco Adventures with his rescheduled presentation, The Ruins of Orchid Jungle. So Eduardo, please, if you may, turn your camera on so you can chat with your participants.